Okay, let's get into this. Reality TV. It's not just a genre, is it? It's this massive global commercial engine that's built on a fundamental
A
paradox.
$5 billion paradox at that.
Exactly. It promises you, the viewer, this window into unscripted real-life situations,
Well,
right?
that's the hook.
But at the same time, it's under constant, just blistering criticism for manipulation, for staging, for exploitation, for basically delivering a completely manufactured reality.
It's the ultimate contradiction, really. And for you listening, our mission today is to really dig in. We've got a whole stack of sources here: market trends, academic studies, some pretty uncomfortable industry
Then
reports.
we're going to distill all of that.
We are. We want to understand the true architecture of this genre.
Hmm.
How did it become this global force? What's the actual cost to the people in the shows and maybe to society? And, crucially, where does it all fit in this crazy streaming-dominated world of 2026?
And the scale of it all, that's what we have to grasp first. Because despite every expose, every lawsuit from a participant, every claim of fabrication, the commercial success is just massive.
It doesn't seem to matter.
Not at all. We're talking about a genre that globally was valued at over $5.2 billion back in 2020. And that number, it just keeps growing every year. It's a huge, highly profitable business built on, well, the promise of authenticity.
Which is why we have to start at the foundation. The economics and the history.
Yeah.
We need to understand the structural reasons why networks and studios started leaning so heavily on this specific way of telling stories in the first place.
Right. So if you ask someone, when did reality TV start? What do they usually say?
Oh, they'll say Survivor or Big Brother.
Maybe The Real World if they're going back a bit further to the 90s.
Right. But the thing is, these formats that portray ordinary people in supposedly unscripted situations, they're almost as old as television itself. The roots go way, way deeper.
Incredibly deep. And I guess that makes defining reality TV a bit slippery.
It does. Because of these historical ancestors. We're really talking about a broader category, something like factual entertainment, a lineage that includes, Alan Funt's Candid Camera.
Which started in 1948.
1948, it was basically the original hidden camera show, right? Filming unsuspecting people who were suddenly confronted with some weird, contrived situation.
And what's so fascinating about Candid Camera is that the simple act of setting up that hidden camera, it already corrupts the reality it's supposed to be capturing.
Of course.
People were, unknowingly put into a controlled environment. Their reaction is entirely based on this artificial thing that's happening to them.
Exactly. And the genre evolved pretty quickly from there. Think about a show like Queen for a Day.
That ran for ages, from 1945 to 1964.
It did. And you had candidates coming on describing something they desperately needed, often sharing these really personal hardships. And then they get awarded prizes.
So you've already got the emotional confession, the public vulnerability.
The makeover trope. It's all there in its earliest form.
And the sources even cite a darker historical footnote, a German propaganda show from the early 1940s called Familienchroniken.
Yeah, that was chilling. It portrayed this young, ideal Aryan couple presenting their daily lives without a script. It was a form of manufactured, unscripted propaganda.
Sometimes it's called the oldest ancestor of the genre.
And it shows that this idea of exploiting ordinary people for some kind of manufactured, emotional, or in this case, ideological purpose is not new at all.
But the really crucial precursor, at least in the U.S., was An American Family.
Right. The 12-part PBS documentary from the early 70s. This was the true fly-on-the-wall approach. The idea was just to chronicle the life of the Loud family in Santa Barbara.
And that show became anything but ordinary. It ended up documenting the parent separation and, pivotally, their son Lance coming out as openly gay.
Which was absolutely groundbreaking for television at the time.
And this is where the lines just get permanently blurred, right?
Yeah.
Even for these high-minded documentary producers.
Absolutely. An American Family was observational documentary. It was aiming for truth. But the presence of the cameras, it just profoundly changed the family's dynamic. And later, you see similar shows marketed in completely different ways.
Like American High.
Exactly. A documentary about high school students.
Yeah.
Fox initially sold it as a reality program in 2000. It failed. Then PBS picks it up, markets it as a documentary, and it's a success. The difference between reality and documentary became less about the technique and more about, well, how you sell it.
So the stage was basically set for this cultural explosion, and it came right around the turn of the millennium. And it's just wonderfully ironic that the big breakthrough moment came right after the 1998 release of The Truman Show.
I love that. The film about a guy who was unknowingly being filmed 24/7 for a TV show, was later called one of the most prophetic sci-fi movies ever. It perfectly parodied the very genre it was about to unleash.
And then they came. The true global prototypes, early 2000s.
Big Brother, which was originally Dutch, Survivor, and Idol, which started in the UK, they basically wrote the rule book for the competitive, isolating, talent-seeking formats we still see everywhere today.
So if we connect this cultural explosion back to the economics, the boom wasn't just because tastes were changing, it was structural. It was driven by money. Why did the industry suddenly need this cheap content?
There were two critical things happening at the same time in the late 20th century. First, the tech shift, just an explosion of cable, satellite, and then digital channels.
So just way more airtime to fill.
Exponentially more.
Yeah.
New broadcasters needed a massive, constant stream of shows to fill all that space, and they needed it fast and cheap.
Volume was everything. And scripted drama, it's too slow and too expensive to keep up with that demand.
Precisely. Which brings us to the second shift, labor crisis and cost control. The 1988 Writers Guild strike in the U.S. was a huge moment.
It lasted 5.5 months.
A long time. And with no union writers working, studios needed content that didn't rely on expensive unionized labor, or, for that matter, professional actors whose costs were just going up and up.
And reality TV, which relies on non-union participants and story producers who aren't in the WGA, it was the perfect solution, a hedge against labor disputes and those escalating scripted costs.
It was the perfect financial instrument. The sources confirm it. On average, factual programming costs less than half of what a scripted drama costs. Just think about that margin.
That's a huge difference.
It's enormous. There's a specific example cited. An hour-long game show, like 21, cost roughly 3 times less to produce than a single episode of a show like Law & Order.
Wow.
So that low production cost means the show can often make back its entire investment just from the network licensing fee, before they've even sold a single dollar of ad time.
That's the key to the whole model, isn't it? Low input, minimal risk.
Exactly. And the potential return, if the show's a hit, is just explosive. Production is cheap, but the ad revenue from a successful reality format can be immense. Because ad prices are all based on audience share, a show like American Idol, at its peak, became arguably the most expensive program for advertisers in the entire U.S. market.
We're talking about staggering figures here.
We really are. Fox was collecting something like $19 million in ad revenue for every single hour that program was on the air.
$19 million an hour.
That model cheap, fast production, avoiding high union costs, but able to command top-tier ad rates, it just cemented reality TV as an essential part of any broadcaster's strategy. It's a perfect profit machine.
And here's where it gets really interesting, tying the global business to local culture. This idea of the global-local dynamic, or glocalization. How do these standardized formats like Idol or Big Brother work when they travel across totally different countries?
They work because they're built as templates. They're robust templates that are specifically designed for local adaptation. The sources show that you have this globalization of the business model, but it meets the resilience of national culture.
So the premise is universal. A singing contest, a competition.
Right. But the success really depends on integrating specific local stories, national symbols, and cultural touchstones.
Can you give us a concrete example of that? How they bake in that local flavor?
Sure. Look at the Idol format when it became Canadian Idol. This is a singing show, obviously. But the format integrated all these localizing elements. Opening shots of historic Canadian sites, references to national pastimes like hockey.
And they were explicitly looking for a national hero.
A national hero, exactly. They make the show feel intrinsically Canadian. It fosters national pride, so it doesn't just feel like some foreign import they've slapped a new logo on.
What's so wild is how good they are at hiding the foreign origin. You know, few viewers probably suspect that their favorite German soap opera, Gute Zeiten, Schlechte Zeiten, is actually an adaptation of an Australian soap.
The Restless Years.
Yeah.
Yeah. The local culture is integrated so effectively that it just feels like it belongs there.
It creates this powerful double incentive. The production company gets a low-risk, proven formula.
And the local broadcaster gets content that feels tailor-made for their audience, even though it's built on a global template. That dynamic is what fueled the genre's worldwide dominance right up until the streaming era began to change everything.
And that economic model we just laid out, the one built on broadcast time slots and cable channels, it's in the middle of a massive upheaval right now, a seismic shift. We're in a new landscape, and the data from 2025 and 2026, it just proves the old rules are gone.
The change is monumental. As of May 2025, we hit this definitive milestone. Streaming officially accounted for 44.8% of all TV viewing in the U.S.
And what makes that number so important? What's the tipping point?
It's the first time that streaming surpassed the combined viewing share of traditional broadcast.
Which was down to what, 20%?
20.1%, yeah. And cable viewing. So this isn't just a trend anymore. This is the new normal. Nielsen, who tracks all this, basically said this was the culmination of a decade-long shift in how we all consume television.
That is a 5-alarm fire for anyone in advertising or content creation. It means the days when TV advertising meant buying an expensive 30-second spot on a cable network. Those days are over.
Definitively over. The distribution is fragmented, and streaming has fundamentally democratized TV advertising. It's accessible to almost any business now.
And this momentum is just picking up speed.
It is. Projections show streaming will hit over 50% of total TV viewing by late 2025 and could be over 55% by 2027. This just keeps reinforcing the decline of linear TV, watching a show at a specific time.
And cord cutting is pouring gasoline on that fire. The projections are just stark. Over 80 million U.S. households are expected to be cord cutters by 2026.
Which creates these incredibly favorable, maybe even monopolistic conditions for the big streaming platforms and their ad partners.
And what's fascinating inside this streaming boom is what some people are calling the Netflix effect. We're seeing these old licensed shows that were hits maybe 20 years ago suddenly becoming these massive streaming phenomena, like Suits or Young Sheldon.
Suits is an incredible example. The show finds this entirely new, massive audience years after it ended. What does that tell us?
It tells us that good content has a really, really long shelf life on these platforms.
Exactly. It shows that content with proven appeal has enormous value when you put it on a streaming service. The audience is platform agnostic. They just follow the content they like. It's also why we saw these huge bidding wars for old show libraries.
Yeah.
That content is comfort food. It fills the gaps.
And speaking of gaps, that brings us to the consumers who are driving this whole shift. The next generation, we're talking about millennials, Gen Z, and even Generation Alpha.
People 41 and younger. Together, they're over half the U.S. population now.
And these generations are demanding radical change. They're the most diverse generations in U.S. history across ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, neurodiversity, you name it.
And they are very vocal about needing media that actually reflects the world they live in, not some sanitized, homogenous reality from older formats.
We can see a really critical disconnect here in how the industry is trying and often failing to meet these demands, especially in gaming.
Gaming is a huge canary in the coal mine. Something like 60% of Americans identify as gamers. And the split between men and women is almost 50-50.
Yet the investment is still heavily skewed towards these high-cost, live-service, multiplayer games.
The very spaces where women gamers and other marginalized groups report facing just constant harassment, bullying, and stereotypes.
That's the painful disconnect right there.
It is. Despite all the money being poured into these live service games, a lot of women gamers are actually preferring solo mobile games and story-driven adventures. Content that's safer, more inclusive, and gives them the rich narrative they want. The industry is just missing a massive opportunity by not catering to that demand.
This all ties back to the one thing that defines modern success: authenticity. If the old model of a stiff 30-second ad doesn't work anymore, what drives people to buy things?
Digital trust. It's all about influencer culture and social media. That's what's driving viewers to shows, to movies, to games now. Consumers trust an influencer recommendation way more than the traditional ad.
Why? What's the secret sauce?
It's the personal bond. Influencers offer what feels like genuine advice, transparency, a degree of authenticity that a corporate ad just can't fake.
That personal connection is everything.
Research backs this up completely. Authenticity, transparency, digital engagement. Like a brand actually answering comments. That's what strengthens brand loyalty and drives purchase decisions. If you want to hit product in 2026, you have to bake authenticity into your strategy.
Now, connecting this back to the content creation side, the instability of the last few years has had a huge effect on this landscape.
The 2023 writers and actors strikes. 4 tumultuous months of a complete production standstill. That resulted in a severe content drought that networks and advertisers were feeling deep into 2024 and 2025.
And here's where we loop back to the economic need for cheap reality TV. Did the strikes actually make the pressure to greenlight unscripted shows even more intense?
Absolutely. The strike resolution, while totally necessary, increased labor costs for scripted shows across the board. So what happens? The studios, reeling from the expense and the standstill, looked for ways to cut costs immediately, and the unscripted sector, already the cheapest option, became an even more attractive financial solution.
But even the unscripted sector felt the pain, right? The sources described a really tough atmosphere for freelancers.
They did. Producers, editors, camera ops, the backbone of reality TV, they experienced brutal slowdowns and a lack of work right after the strikes. Some sources mention this chilling atmosphere, like the studios were deliberately holding back on greenlighting new shows, including reality shows, as a way to, I don't know, correct their finances or maybe even retaliate after the expense of the labor agreements.
That sounds incredibly hostile.
It created this sense of professional precariousness, even cannibalism, among freelancers fighting for jobs. The demand for content was there, but the money wasn't flowing. And this instability just reinforces the economic truth we started with. Reality TV is a cost saver, but when a whole system is under pressure, even the cost savers get squeezed. Which brings us right to the deep ethical compromises that this kind of low-cost, high-drama factory has to make.
So if the entire financial incentive is to make reality content as quickly and as cheaply as possible, while also making it as dramatic as possible, does that pressure just inevitably lead to the ethical problems at the core of the genre?
It often does, yeah. I mean, reality TV is constantly criticized for a fundamental lack of integrity. It uses techniques that systematically compromise any truthful representation just for the sake of entertainment.
We're talking about coaching behavior, staging scenes.
All of it, using manipulative editing. And this is where the boundary blurring gets really complicated because we hold documentary to a different standard, don't we?
Right. We expect a documentary to inform and enlighten us, to follow some kind of strict ethical code. But we sort of assume reality TV is just there to entertain.
That's the public perception. But critics argue the distinction is pretty thin. The essence of a documentary also lies in the dramatization of actual material. Both genres are constructs. They're shaped by human choices in an edit room. Both claim to represent reality, but the construction of story, often borrowing from fiction, has become the great unifier, and it frequently overrides any loyalty to what actually happened.
So let's talk about the editor, the person in the dark room who effectively becomes the manipulator. The practice that really symbolizes all of this is the frankenbite. What is that, and how common is it?
The frankenbite is, it's the practice of rearranging recorded audio clips. You're splicing words or even just syllables from different sentences, different moments, to create an entirely new meaning.
Something that was never actually said in that order?
Never. It's used to heighten conflict or generate some provocative statement. It's an incredibly effective and, frankly, dangerous tool for directing how an audience sees a participant.
The idea that you can take 2 words from Monday and 2 from Friday and create a sentence the person didn't say, or at least didn't mean, that's alarming.
And the data on its use is staggering. In one survey of editors working across factual programming, a shocking half of them, confirmed they had consciously manipulated what they considered to be the truth.
How did they describe what they were doing?
They described things like moving chronology around, which completely changes cause and effect in a story. Or even adding sound effects like tears and crying to an emotionally charged but silent scene. They're not just shaping reality, they're often inventing the emotional reality you consume.
And the most complex part of that finding is that this isn't just happening in reality TV, this is happening in documentary programs, too.
That's right. The same manipulative practice is used and justified by editors in both. Even respected observational documentarians use techniques like condensing weeks of dialogue into a short conversation or hiding audio cuts with music that are functionally identical to what gets called frankenbiting in reality TV.
But did they justify it differently?
The justification is different. In a documentary, an editor might say they're helping the subject express themselves or making them sound more eloquent. But the core technique of sacrificing the recorded chronological reality, it's the same. It's a spectrum, not a hard line.
This brings up a huge ethical problem for the editors themselves, this loyalty dilemma. Who are they loyal to when they're crafting a story?
Well, the sources reveal that while editors say they're concerned for the subject's well-being, their primary professional loyalty is often somewhere else entirely. The key theme that came up over and over was being loyal to the story.
And that loyalty to the dramatic narrative. It overrides everything else.
It often overrides their loyalty to the participant, to the audience, and sometimes even to their own moral compass.
The consequences of that are pretty clear. You protect the narrative at all costs.
Exactly. Very few editors would ever let a participant see a finished edit before it airs. Why? Because, as one editor put it, if the participants would realize what editing does to them, they would require changes I can't do. That quote just perfectly captures the power imbalance. The secrecy is necessary to maintain the illusion.
It sounds like the rules of a three-act movie script have just taken over reality production, this idea of narrative dominance.
It is. Factual programming has aggressively borrowed that three-act structure from fiction: exposition, conflict, resolution. And that template forces complex human realities into these simple, linear plots.
The messiness of real life just gets sanded down.
Completely. The will of an individual becomes the driving force, leading to these tidy resolutions that, real life rarely offers. The ideal of discovered drama is replaced by intentionally constructed drama.
And that construction allows for complex people to be quickly flattened into easy-to-digest tropes. The hero, the sidekick, or, most destructively, the villain.
There's a powerful anecdote in the sources that illustrates this perfectly. An editor talked about their own experience turning a complex immigration protagonist, a man who was brave but not perfect, into the story's required villain just through editing.
How do they do it?
They focused only on his self-serving reasons for fleeing his country. They cut out all the parts that showed his courage and focused only on his flaws. The editor realized they were complicit in giving the story more importance than reality. It shows how easily narrative demands can reduce a human being to a damaging stereotype.
And if the editors themselves are the ones deciding what reality is, their own definitions of truth must be pretty worrying. It sounds like they've kind of given up on defining it at all.
They have. When they were surveyed about what the truth is, the answers were all over the place. Wildly subjective, an emotional experience, crafted, impossible subjective. I just gave up on defining it.
Or even just whatever the director or producer wants.
Exactly. One quote was particularly chilling. "We are crafting truth. Truth is in the hands of the arbiter, the editor. It is dangerous to make claims for the truth. Just don't tell people that you do that."
That's the invisible hand, just acting completely unchecked. And that mindset seems to be justified by this really negative assumption about the audience's intelligence.
Precisely. Many editors just assume that audiences lack media literacy and, frankly, do not care about how a show is edited, and that assumption empowers them to play God, justifying all this manipulation because they believe the audience just wants to be entertained and won't notice or care about the cost to the people on screen.
But that assumption itself is a problem. It puts all the blame on the viewer's supposed ignorance instead of on the producer's lack of honesty.
Exactly.
So when this ethical compromise becomes routine, the human cost to the participants, it has to be substantial. We really need to focus on the severe and often unsafe and inhumane conditions that these cast members face, using a show like Love is Blind as a specific example.
The conditions described are just deeply exploitative. Shocking, really. From the moment they arrive, the production takes near total control of their environment and their emotional state. They confiscate everything: cell phones, wallets, passports, cash, even their room keys.
That level of isolation has to be incredibly stressful. What's the psychological goal of creating that kind of high-pressure bubble?
The goal is to create a state of high emotional tension, exhaustion, and total reliance on the production team, all of which serves the production schedule and helps generate drama. Cast members are subjected to these grueling workdays, sometimes up to 20 hours long.
And they're deprived of food and water, plied with alcohol.
Right, and isolated when the cameras aren't rolling. These extreme, unnatural conditions become the raw material for breakdowns and heightened, dramatic storylines. One source mentioned a cast member who fell asleep during a love confession, and that was actively turned into a plot point by the producers.
The standard defense the industry always uses is the "you signed up for it" mentality, dismissing them as just fame chasers who knew what they were getting into. But that defense just feels so inadequate, doesn't it?
It completely fails to recognize the systemic exploitation. A lot of these contestants are not seasoned influencers or actors. They're often recruited directly by casting agents on Instagram, LinkedIn, even at the gym.
And they participate because they actually believe in the premise. In the case of Love is Blind, finding love without judging someone's looks.
Exactly. They may lack the media savvy, the cynicism, the experience, or the legal help to protect themselves under that kind of pressure. They're highly susceptible to manipulation and even legal threats from production if they try to leave or complain.
So we can't just dismiss their right to a safe work environment just because they wanted to find love or get some recognition.
No. Regardless of why they went on the show, they are performing labor. Labor that generates enormous profits for these companies. And their safety should be paramount. The ethical question really centers on a quote we found. Are we, as a society, willing to destroy people's lives and not give them any chance at redemption when they make a mistake for entertainment?
That really frames the core societal problem. Shifting to a broader critique, scholars have analyzed how reality TV seems to echo what they call neoliberal ideology. It reinforces certain political and economic views.
We should probably define neoliberal ideology for the listener. What does that mean here?
At its simplest, it's a political and economic philosophy, really dominant since the 1980s, that pushes for the absolute power of the market, the belief that the market solves everything.
And it emphasizes individual responsibility over, say, state or community support.
Right. So how does reality TV reinforce this idea that the market solves all and that it's all on you, the individual?
It focuses exclusively on the individual. Think about lifestyle makeover shows, coaching shows, self-help formats. They're all intensely focused on improving aspects of an ordinary person's life. Their looks, their home, their finances. These shows implicitly endorse the idea of branding the self.
You have to become your own flexible, marketable brand to survive.
It's your only protection against economic uncertainty.
Yeah.
So if you're failing, it's not because of systemic issues like the housing market or lack of health care. It's because you didn't hustle hard enough. You didn't brand yourself effectively.
A show like Shark Tank glorifies the market and entrepreneurial aggression.
Exactly. Or look at a show like Hoarders. The problem is framed entirely as an individual psychological failure, not as a potential issue of mental health access or socioeconomic strain. The narrative template aligns perfectly with an ideology that stresses personal responsibility above all else.
And this relentless focus on aspiration and improvement, especially in a highly curated, edited format, it just fuels this incredibly damaging comparison culture.
Reality TV accelerates that trend by presenting what we call real people. Real people who are actually highly curated highlight reels on social media and TV. They're always sexy, fit, and wealthy at younger and younger ages, and it all seems to be achieved with less and less effort.
That perceived unfairness, when you compare it to your own messy life, it's corrosive.
It is, and there's this fascinating analogy researchers use involving capuchin monkeys that really drives home our deep-seated need for fairness.
I remember this one. Tell us about it.
It's a classic behavioral economics experiment. You have two monkeys perform the exact same task. One gets a great reward, a juicy grape. The other gets a lesser reward, a plain cucumber. The monkey with the cucumber will often get so angry it destroys the cucumber in defiance.
It rejects the reward because the whole system feels unfair.
Yes. The human parallel is clear. That perception of unfairness, that the person on TV got the grape, the fame, the wealth for seemingly no effort, while you only get the cucumber, despite working hard, it's incredibly disenchanting and debilitating. It makes you feel like your own hard work is not worth it in a rigged system.
And beyond the psychological toll, the genre is criticized for just normalizing destructive social behavior.
Critics argue that the format, by rewarding dramatic behavior with more screen time, inadvertently encourages all of us to be more performative and extreme. Cruelty, fighting, big reactions. That's normalized for entertainment because that's what drives the drama and keeps people watching. And this pattern frequently leaves the cast members themselves with severe mental health issues and permanent damage to their careers and reputations.
Finally, we have to talk about the strong gendered critique of the genre.
It's really important to look at the demographics here. Approximately 65% of reality TV viewers are women, and women aged 18 to 34 are the single largest segment, making up about 45% of the whole fan base.
And yet, the genre is almost universally labeled as trashy, lowbrow, guilty pleasure.
Right.
So why is a genre that's primarily consumed by women so consistently dismissed by critics and cultural gatekeepers?
It reflects this long history of classed, raced, and gendered taste cultures. Media aimed predominantly at women, whether it's romance novels, soap operas, or reality TV, has historically been a target for cultural criticism. It gets blamed for society's ills precisely because it's popular with women. The critique is often less about the content and more about the perceived low cultural value of the person watching it.
This has been a deeply complex dive into manufactured reality. I mean, we've traced the genre from its economic roots as this low-cost hedge against labor costs.
Right, through its explosion into a massive global industry.
And we've established that the shift to streaming is now total. Streaming, surpassing combined broadcast and cable viewing, is the defining media milestone of 2025.
And critically, we've revealed the significant ethical cost that's just baked into the storytelling process. From the frankenbites used by editors to the structural exploitation faced by participants.
And all of it is fueled by this assumption that the audience demands drama, no matter the cost to the truth or the people involved.
So as we look ahead to 2026, industry experts are predicting a pivot for the media and entertainment sector. The focus is going to be on simplicity, smart portfolio strategy, and the responsible use of AI.
But the single most important asset, and the one the industry really needs to invest in, is authenticity.
It ties directly back to the failure of traditional advertising and the rise of digital trust. Companies have to start prioritizing experiential entertainment, moving it from a side business to a core focus to deliver these distinctive, trusted experiences that build genuine bonds with their audiences.
And we should also keep tracking those high-growth segments: women's sports, emerging leagues, global team ownership models. They're all projected to keep growing in value and visibility in 2026. The shift in viewing habits will drive investment toward more diverse content.
All of this analysis really forces us back to the core ethical debate, doesn't it? If the problem is manipulation, is the solution stricter regulations to protect the participants? Or is the burden really on us, the audience, to get smarter about what we're watching, to increase our media literacy?
The argument being that if the audience, armed with that literacy, stopped demanding reality from reality television, then the producers wouldn't be required to deliver this false authenticity anymore. They wouldn't have to lie about the process.
Instead, the genre could just be accepted for what it actually is: highly engaging, low-cost storytelling that uses non-professional actors who are heavily guided by the invisible hand of the editor. Accepting that would eliminate the false panic around truth, while also, hopefully, increasing the pressure for ethical treatment of the participants who make all the profits possible.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought. What shifts in our collective viewing habits, in our willingness to just appreciate the story as a constructed story, would it take to demand that genuine, unmanipulated authenticity becomes the industry's most enduring and profitable advantage?